Chaim v'bracha. To life and to blessings. What's worse? A bad character quality or the mind that is corrupted? Hmm?
Character quality or mind that is corrupted.
Same thing, though.
Well, mind corrupted is something of the mind. Character is something more of the heart, right? So what's your thoughts?
It's
What's
the
what's
heart.
worse?
Heart.
The heart?
Yeah.
Character quality.
I mean, this is not their fault.
No, we're not talking about. Okay, good. What do you say, Menachem Hillel?
It's mind. Oh,
The mind? Because
because the mind is the one that actually controls the heart. It's supposed to control the
because
heart.
mind controls the heart. Okay, excellent. Okay, very good point. David, what do you say?
The heart also.
The heart. Okay, in other words, character quality. Less
The mind.
the mind. Ooh, we got 2 against 2 over here. Oh, now we need a tiebreaker. We need a tiebreaker. Chaim v'rocha.
Sponsors. The response to rabbi is.
Sevenzer vu miret. Very old. It depends from what vantage point we're speaking of. From the vantage point of the vantage point of the ultimate goal is that we shape our character. From the vantage point of what's more deeper part of me, it would be the mind. Right.
Oh.
So both are correct. The end goal is the mind should develop proper character qualities, right? That's the end goal. But that being said, a corruption in the mind then will be a greater corruption in the heart and the character qualities. So that in that respect, the mind is more important, right? But the end goal is that development, right? That it shouldn't just remain in the mind. So it's like taking a seed and you have a seed that is blemished, then of course the outgrowth will be a blemished tree. And the fruits that it bears will have, right?
Mhm.
If you start without a blemish, then maybe you have a hope that in the end, things will grow properly. So things grow from the mind, right? The growth is from the mind. What your mind feeds to the heart. The ultimate goal, though, is that it should feed it, and therefore you should have good character quality. Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. It may be freezing cold outside, but it's very warm on the inside, especially when you have David's coffee that is nice and hot, right? It warms you up. But more so than anything, it's the warmth of Tanya that brings us to where we need to have a warm heart We continue and conclude today to understand the animal soul, the end of chapter 8, which will then give us a complete understanding of the animal nature within us. The klipa, right? The shell that conceals over the holiness that we have within us of the godly soul. And with understanding the two components we have within us, the godly soul and the animal soul, then we can begin life, which will start tomorrow. This is all a prep for life. Okay. So now we're going to learn when you speak words that are not for the sake of heaven, which anything that's not for the sake of heaven is an expression of the animal soul. Exactly. Something right now we're learning Torah, and therefore the words that we're expressing, and with the intent of connecting to God, they're for the sake of heaven. But what happens if you engage in idle chatter? Right? If you engage in idle chatter, which, let's say, an ignorant person of Torah who cannot study, they're not able to constantly engage themselves in Torah study, right? So idle chatter for that individual could be a permissible thing. Talk about the weather because, you know, as I just did, right? You could talk about the weather. Someone who they could talk words of Torah and don't speak words of Torah and they speak about the weather, that's already a prohibition, right? What are you talking about things that are idle when you could speak about something that's not, right? But a person who's not at that level, so then for them to talk about the weather. Now, for you to speak about the weather with someone because they are not holding by something of value, that's a different story. So you got to speak, and bring them and connect to them. So if connecting to them will be talking about the weather, right? Or the like, so fine. But if you could, two people that can speak words of Torah and they speak about the weather, but their head is full of teachings that they could express that, then that would be wasting time. But the person who can't, or is not there, right? So then for them, that's permissible. However, they still need to be cleansed after their time in this world, right? Because what is the greatest gift that God gives us is time. Greatest gift. And not to use that time in a wise and godly way means it was a waste of time, right? Now we're making a distinction here. It was a waste of time. That person wasn't capable. So it's not, but yet it is a stain. But the stain that's on the soul will be the hollow of the sling, as it's called, kafakela. What's the hollow of the sling? It is that after our time in this world, and by the way, as we've mentioned before, this is not a punishment. Cleansing is not a punishment. Punishment is, you did something bad and go face the corner with a dunce cap in school. A punishment is that you get a slap on the wrist for what you did. It's not it is not a consequence of your actions. Here, cleansing is a consequence of your actions. You play in the dirt, you get dirty as a child, your mother, father have to put you into a bath, and it can be painful to get, my granddaughter got a new brush, and Actually, my daughter, oh, she once had a brush, and in camp, it was a roll brush, not a flat one. And she was playing with it in her hair, just playing with it, and it got all tangled to such a degree that the counselors couldn't get it out, and they called up my wife and said, "What should we do? We can't get out the the brush because of the curled one." And she was playing with it in such a way that it got so entangled. Now, did she mean to do it? No, but she's a kid. So a kid. Was there something punishing that was a consequence? Yeah, it was very painful. Very painful. In the end, they had to actually cut her hair very short over here. Thank God it grows back. But it was painful also to cut your hair short like that. It was painful because you'll kind of look kind of, right? Funny, right? You got a bang here and you got short hair over here. Was that for, what was she, 11 or something like that? Was that, but it's punishing. So that's a consequence, though. That's what happens. So the hollow of the sling is like this. God throws you from one extreme to another. God shows you the truth. The truth is that every moment is precious. Then he slings you to what you did, right? And what did you do? You spoke idle talk, right? Where even though you were not a Torah scholar, so therefore your mind's not full of Torah, but yet the truth is the truth. And therefore there's a cleansing that happens. What's a cleansing? You feel you feel bad, right? The soul feels pain. I don't bait it. No. Listen to what we're saying. Please don't add, don't subtract. Right. No, it's not. That's what's called the hollow of the sling. It's not called purgatory. We're going to get there. Right. It's because you're shown the truth. And when you know the truth in life and you didn't live to the truth, up to the truth, if you're a honest person, that will create pain. Only pain. Not, oh, I'm good for nothing. That's not called pain. That's a judgment on the pain. That's not the point that you're good for nothing. But pain. What's good about pain? What's good about pain? No, pain means I got to change something. Yeah, but a sign of what? Change. When you have pain in your tooth, you need to change. You got to change something. You got to go to the dentist and fix your tooth. So pain's not a bad thing. It's healing. It's the first step in healing. So here's the healing for the soul after we wasted time over here with idle chatter, that there will be the hollow of the sling. That's only if you spoke idle talk. But if you spoke something forbidden, meaning you spoke negative to somebody, you hurt them in your words and what you said, you were scoffing, you spoke slander, then the hollow of the sling is insufficient. Now you got to go to Gehenna and purgatory. Right? The soul goes to purgatory. So too, if someone was able to engage in Torah study and didn't, and they occupy themselves. Now that's someone who can. Before we spoke about someone who can't occupy themselves in Torah study at all times, or when they have a free moment. Not all times. Of course, if you're going to school, if you're you've got to go to work, and you've got other obligations, so you're not going to study Torah. Then we're talking about when you have the time to. But someone who can engage in Torah study when they have free time and they don't, then the hollow of the sling is not effective enough because the stain is deeper, right? And therefore you need a more consequential cleansing process. That's called purgatory. Okay? Is purgatory in order to give you pain? No, what's it for? Exactly. It's for cleansing. Right. Cleansing. Metaphorically, so if a person neglected a positive commandment like the study of Torah out of laziness, right? So then the purgatory, metaphorically, is that of snow, right? Wake you up, right?
I could be woken up.
To wake you up, right? The other day, the mikveh was cold. Oh, I didn't need a coffee after that for at least 10 minutes. Right? Woke you up, right? Right? It wakes you up, right? That's the metaphorically. If your sin was lust, then the purgatory is going to be heat, fire. Metaphorically, it's not a fire, right? It means it's a cleansing, a cleansing. So that's all about idle chatter, verse, right? That we're talking about. How about if you occupy yourself? And that's all in the emotional level. Because idle chatter, why do you speak idle chatter? No, it comes from the heart.
Okay.
Why do you have lust for something? It comes from the heart. Idle chatter is like, it's not coming from intelligence, it's coming from the heart, right? But if you occupy yourself, now we're going to a different intellectual disciplines that have to do with the nations of the world that are of no consequence, right? They don't have a consequence. We'll explain what that means in a moment. Then you're also neglecting Torah, which you could then occupy yourself in, right? But the impurity there is worse than idle chatter. Idle chatter is because it comes from the heart, from the character quality of the individual, that we like to just schmooze and let me give my what I did last night, where I went on vacation, what I did. I thought that's all idle chatter, right? That comes from the heart because you like to make yourself feel good that look, just went here and I did this and I accomplished that, so on and so forth. But now intellectual pursuit of an that's even worse than idle chatter. Why? Because idle chatter is a defilement of the emotions of the individual, right? An idle chatter speech comes from the element of a klipa, of ruach, of the spirit of your soul. But when you defile your Chabad, that's your intellectual faculties, that's much worse, right? That's much worse. Why is it much worse? Because it's a much deeper part of who you are. It's not just the spirit of your soul, it's the neshama of you. So in the case of sciences of the nations that defile the individual, right? Which those sciences come from the hinder part of the divine wisdom. And it's not saying the sciences of wisdom of the nations of the world, that it's a untruth, but it's the external wisdom of God, as opposed to Torah study is the internal wisdom of God. It's a true reflection of him. It's not a means to an end. It is of him. When we study Torah right now, we're grasping God himself, as we learn from chapter 4 in Tanya, right? As God compresses in the study of Torah and in the infinite wisdom of God, he puts it into a compressed box, so to speak, of the writings of the Torah that we actually connect to God. The external wisdom of God is the sciences of the world, right? That only give us an external connection to God and not an internal. So therefore, we're getting the hinder part of God, right? And the hinder part then contaminates, because it's the hind part. It contaminates the intelligence of the individual. Unless, there's a caveat to this, very important. Unless someone's using it as an instrument to either gain livelihood, so they're studying this so they can have a livelihood, right? Which they are gaining a livelihood in order that they can serve God, because that's where they can raise their family. And without a livelihood, it's difficult to live life, right? Or that they apply the sciences to know God. And if I'm applying the sciences just to know the science as a science, so then that's the external aspect of the divine wisdom of God, and that is a contamination to the mind because you're separating it from God. But if you're using it in order that I can have a livelihood, or even better, that through the sciences I can know God better, then it becomes like Maimonides and the Ramban, that they used it as a tool, um, to be better connected to God. And then it becomes what's the term over here? 1 second. Then it becomes part of your service of God and not separate from the service of God. So what does this mean? Right, and that's why Maimonides, Nachmanides, they were doctors. So first of all, they were doctors. It was a livelihood. Secondly, they were doctors, brought healing to people. They used it as a service of God. But even deeper, the teachings of it for them was a way to know God on another dimension. There's knowing God by studying Torah, which is knowing the internal aspect, knowing God himself. But then there's knowing God through what he does, which is creation. And part of creation is, well, he creates the inanimate and the vegetation, animal. And if you can know that science of God through that science to know God better, then it becomes a tool to connect to God rather than separate yourself from God. And we see all the nations of the world, right? All peoples, right? And it's interesting. If you look, all people, I actually heard a podcast, interesting, that, the in America, I don't know if I'll quote this properly. I don't remember the stats exactly, but those in America, 80% of Americans believe in God, something like that. 80% or something of that notion on some, whatever that means, right? 80, if you look at scientists in America, only 7% or 10%, something like 10% believe. Proof positive that when you study the sciences, it doesn't bring you closer to God unless you actively seek it to bring you closer to God. Right? So you might say, so obviously objective truth might be then that it brings you further away from God. So maybe that's the objective truth. That's what an atheist might say, right? No, it's not true. It's not there anybody that because a scientist is objective. And as COVID brings proof positive, right, that all the science of COVID was not necessarily so pure. It was agenda driven. A lot of the things were agenda driven. And as anybody who looks more deeply into any scientific inquiry, it's agenda driven. My sister-in-law, when she was taking psychology in UCLA, and she wrote a paper for her, I don't know if it was her master's or what. I don't know what it was. In any case, so she had a hypothesis, and the conclusion was the exact opposite of what her hypothesis was. So the professor said to her, well, if you would have asked your questions like this and like that, then you would have reached your hypothesis. She dropped out. That's not true. That's agenda driven. You have an agenda. This is what you want to see as your conclusion. So you ask the question in such and such a way. And we see that. We see that very clearly in everything that goes on. And that's why people don't believe in politicians anymore. They don't believe in scientists anymore. I mean, in the same way that they believed before, because we see clearly. So the same thing is that just because you're a scientist and therefore you don't believe is it's not because I'm objective and I saw the objective truth and therefore, not at all. We're all subjective. The question is what we're subjective about, right? Am I subjective about my animal soul that wants to feel big about myself? Or am I subjective about my godly soul that wants to feel connected to something more than myself? You choose. You choose. So the Alter Rebbe is telling us over here very clearly, and he concludes chapter 8, that the mind of the individual, right, when you subject it to teachings that may take you away from the ways of the truth of God, the truth of Torah, you could choose that it doesn't. Because we all choose what we want in life. It's not like we're just, we are I'm objective people. I'm an objective person who's only seeking the truth. We're seeking what we want. The question is what you want. What do you want? What do you want? I want to be a better Jew. I want to be a chassid of the Rebbe. I want to be connected to God Almighty. I want something more than what I just am, as just a purely self-directed, self-absorbed, do-gooder, even intelligent person that just is self-fulfillment. Because, when you think about it, where does most of the inanimate of the world end up in? Where's most of the water of the world end? Becoming bigger water? No, gets absorbed in vegetation, right? Rain falls, most of it is vegetation. Right now, let rain fall in California so it can put out some fires, right? But most of inanimate, right, gets absorbed in a form of life greater than itself, vegetation. Most of vegetation gets absorbed into a life greater than itself, and that is animal kingdom. And animal kingdom, most of it gets absorbed into a life greater than itself, and that's human. So where's human go? Just self-absorbed? That's like contrary to the nature of creation. We're self-absorbed? No. We become absorbed in the life greater than us, and that is the divine. That's a choice you have to make. And therefore, when you study anything that is not of Torah teachings, of the sciences of the world, literature, whatever it is, if it's disconnected from your true spiritual self and connection to God, then what it's going to do ultimately is remove you from God, because you're not getting absorbed into something greater than yourself, into the divine. But when you see it as a vehicle, as a potential that you could use it for becoming and revealing your true inner self, then the teachings become something that are amazing. As Maimonides was, and Nachmanides and so many others were great scientists and doctors and so on and so forth. And that's ultimately what it's meant for. All right, any questions? Tori, psychology doesn't explain more morality, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there is So, Chris, is all there is to know about God in the Torah? Well, I mean, definitely it's all in the Torah, but it's not, it's, we need to try to know God in our human experience too, in the world that we live in. So it's not just in the Torah, no question. Of course, the inner divine wisdom is only in the Torah. But as we said, God's external wisdom is in creation. So when you understand creation, you're knowing God, but externally, you're knowing about God. You're not knowing him, though. You know about what he does. It's like a person. I see what you do, so I know about you, but all I know is about what you do. I don't know what's going on inside of you, the intimate part of you, right? Well, the intimate part of God, God put only in the Torah. The intimate part of God is the infinite of God. What is the meaning of intellectual pursuit here? So intellectual pursuit means the intellectual pursuit, meaning here of science, of any mundane human wisdom. That's what it means. Is the max time in purgatory 11 months? Yes. As Mashiach comes speedily, we will go through the cleansing process in this world. Yeah, it's not, yeah, something like that. Do we still go through the sling or purgatory if we do tshuva? It'll definitely be less, but it might still be a stain left. Okay, so let's say I eat non-kosher food. I did it when I knew that I was bad, and so it was not accident. No, what is a cleansing process? Yeah, I don't know exactly. You know, if a person was aware of something, um, uh, there's two cleansing processes. The sling of the hollow is lesser, and purgatory is more deep. You know, thinking of a cleansing process is more deep. I don't want to tell anybody what God's going to do for them. I don't know. But, you know, listen, let's be very clear. Only the truly righteous don't have any cleansing. I'm going to have cleansing. We're all going to have cleansing. That's okay. It's God who loves us who's doing the cleansing. Pain is not a bad thing. Pain is not bad. It's painful, but it's not bad. Again, the metaphor that we've used. If your tooth hurts and you have pain, that's not bad. It's actually good. It's a sign that you need to go to the dentist to fix something. If you didn't have the pain, then you wouldn't fix it. So God is fixing something in our soul. Now, after 120, we can fix it in this world and do tshuva. And for the most part, it might take it all, it might take it all away or partially away. Most likely partially away. But whatever, let's say. And at the end of our lives, then we can't fix it ourselves. So God's going to fix it for us. And why is he fixing it for us? Why is he cleansing? Because he, out of love and for our betterment, because he wants to give us divine pleasure in Gan Eden. And you can't have pleasure of something good when you're mired in something negative, right? If you are mired in negative of dealing with someone that has got a very negative outlook on life, and everything is dark and everything is you know, is like and they can't appreciate the pleasure of something. Why? Because they're mired in that negativity, so they can't see the goodness of what they have around them, how blessed they are. Once you remove that, then you can appreciate the blessing that you have. So the same thing will be after 120, after our time in this world, when we will, when Hashem will take away that negativity that is staining our soul, then we can have the pleasure of the divine. That's amazing. So it's God who loves us, who wants the best for us. That's how we need to see it. No other way. What do we know is a drop, and what we don't know yet. Okay, I hope that's clear. Do they truly have cleansing? Everybody has a cleansing. Again, to what degree, that's, that's the only question. All right, amazing. You're all amazing.
Thank you very much.
I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zurich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege, a pleasure to share with you.